I think we need someone with a little more presence. Joshua folded his hands on the conference table, as if he had just delivered a thoughtful compliment instead of ending 3 years of work with a single sentence. I stared at him for a moment, waiting for the rest. Across the room, Sasha avoided eye contact, pretending to organize her notebook even though the meeting had clearly ended. Theo, our HR manager, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Finally, Joshua sighed. Don't misunderstand me, Luca. Your numbers are excellent. Everyone agrees you've delivered consistently, but leadership isn't only about performance. There it was. The sentence I'd heard in different forms for months. Not visible enough. Not outgoing enough. Not the right personality. Meanwhile, the promotion to operations manager was going to Toby. I looked at Joshua. So my results weren't enough? They absolutely matter. But they weren't enough. He hesitated. Toby naturally connects with people. He motivates the team. I almost laughed. Motivated them? Toby spent more time walking between departments with a coffee in his hand than actually finishing projects. Whenever a deadline became difficult, somehow the work quietly landed on my desk. I had rewritten client proposals at midnight because Toby hadn't finished them. I had rebuilt damaged project schedules after he promised impossible delivery dates. I had covered for mistakes nobody even knew he'd made. Yet somehow he was the inspirational leader. I appreciate the feedback, I finally said. Joshua smiled, relieved that I wasn't arguing. I knew you'd understand. No, I finally understood. Those were two very different things. When I joined Northbridge Logistics 3 years earlier, I genuinely believed hard work spoke for itself. I was 29. Not the youngest analyst. Not the oldest. Just someone who enjoyed solving problems. Within my first 6 months, I redesigned our shipment tracking reports. Nobody asked me to. I simply got tired of spending 2 hours every morning cleaning spreadsheets that should have taken 10 minutes. The new reports reduce weekly administrative work by almost 15 hours. Joshua congratulated the department. Nobody mentioned my name. I didn't care. Back then. Then I automated client forecasting, improved inventory planning, created dashboards managers actually used. Each improvement made everyone else's jobs easier. Each improvement quietly became the team's achievement. Again. I told myself recognition would eventually come. It always came later. Didn't it? About a year before that promotion meeting, I started keeping notes. Not because I expected conflict. Because I noticed something strange. Whenever I proposed an idea during meetings, silence. A week later, Toby would present almost the exact same solution. Joshua loved it. Excellent initiative. Great strategic thinking. Exactly what this department needs. First I thought it was coincidence. Then it happened again. And again. Eventually I stopped speaking immediately. Instead, I emailed my suggestions after meetings. Timestamps. Documents. Revision history. Everything. Not because I planned revenge. Because I wanted a record of what actually happened. The promotion announcement went out that afternoon. Congratulations, Toby. Looking forward to your leadership. Well deserved. The company chat exploded with emojis. I typed exactly 3 words. Congratulations. Well earned. Then I closed the window. Across the office, Toby stood beside Joshua laughing loudly, while people lined up to shake his hand. He caught my eye. Hey, Luca. I walked over. No hard feelings? I smiled politely. None. You'll still help me during the transition, right? You know how most of these systems work. Most. Not all. Every reporting process. Every forecasting model. Every automated workflow. Every client performance dashboard. I had built them. Officially, they belonged to the company. Unofficially, very few people understood how they actually worked. Of course, I replied. I'll document everything. Joshua overheard us. That's exactly why you're such a valuable team player. That phrase again. Valuable. Just never valuable enough to promote. That evening I drove home later than usual. Not because I had extra work. Because I didn't want to think. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while traffic crawled through the city. Normally I'd listen to podcasts. That night I drove in silence. When I reached my apartment I made coffee even though it was nearly 9. Then I opened a folder on my laptop. Independent Process Framework. That was its boring name. Deliberately boring. Anyone glancing at the folder would assume it contained ordinary work documents. Inside was nearly 2 years of evenings and weekends. It wasn't company software. I had been careful about that. Everything had been developed on my own equipment, using publicly available tools, built from my own ideas. The framework wasn't replacing company systems. It connected existing software more intelligently. Instead of managers chasing information across 5 different platforms, it gathered everything automatically. Project risks, client delays, budget changes, supplier issues. One dashboard. Real time. I originally built it because my own job had become frustrating. Later I realized it could work almost anywhere. I never mentioned it at Northbridge. Not after watching good ideas disappear into someone else's presentation. Instead, I kept improving it. Quietly. 2 days after Toby's promotion, I received a LinkedIn message from Elijah. We had worked together years earlier before he moved to another logistics company. Luca, random question. Are you happy where you are? Simple. Direct. I smiled. For the first time that week. Maybe the timing was coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. I replied. Depends who's asking. His answer arrived less than 5 minutes later. Someone who remembers who actually solved problems. I leaned back in my chair. Outside, rain continued falling against the windows. For the first time since Joshua's meeting, the future didn't feel like something I had lost. It felt like something quietly waiting for me. Elijah suggested we meet on Saturday morning. Not in a flashy restaurant. Not in some expensive downtown office. Just a quiet cafe overlooking the river. That alone told me something. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wanted an honest conversation. When I arrived, he was already there with 2 coffees waiting on the table. Luca. It's been a while. He smiled. Too long. For the first 10 minutes we barely talked about work. We caught up on life. His daughter had just started school. I'd finally moved into my own apartment after years of renting tiny places with roommates. Only after the small talk did he lean forward. I've been following your career. I laughed. I don't think there's much to follow. There is if you know where to look. He pulled out his tablet. Several dashboards appeared on the screen. They looked strangely familiar. I recognized the reporting style. I frowned. What do you mean? When companies suddenly improve forecasting accuracy without changing software, someone behind the scenes usually deserves the credit. He looked directly at me. I asked around. You did. I've worked in this industry long enough to know that managers rarely build systems. I couldn't help smiling. So you figured it out. I figured someone named Luca was making Northbridge look a lot smarter than it actually was. Elijah worked for Horizon Supply Group. Not a direct competitor. Large enough to matter. Different enough that hiring me wouldn't create legal issues. He explained that their operations had doubled during the previous 2 years. Growth sounded exciting from the outside. Inside a company, it usually meant something else. More clients. More warehouses. More employees. More confusion. Our teams spend too much time chasing information, he admitted. Everybody has data. Nobody has visibility. I nodded. I've seen that. So. He paused. What would you change if you had complete freedom? It was the first time in years someone had asked me that question. Not. What can you improve? Not. Can you save us money? But. What would you build? I spent nearly 40 minutes sketching ideas on a napkin. Integrated reporting. Automatic risk alerts. Standardized project reviews. Decision tracking. Clear accountability. When I finally looked up, Elijah was grinning. I was hoping you'd say something like that. I can't promise you a management position. The sentence surprised me. Most recruiters started with titles. Elijah didn't. What I can promise, he continued, is that nobody will stop you from improving the way we work. Who would I report to? Iona. The operations director? You know her. I've seen her speak at conferences. Elijah nodded. She cares about results. That sounded familiar. But this time, it didn't feel like an empty slogan. Monday morning at Northbridge felt exactly the same, which somehow made everything feel different. Toby had already rearranged his office. New chair, new monitor, even a framed motivational quote on the wall. Success comes from great leadership. I almost smiled. At 10 o'clock he stopped by my desk. "Luca, got a minute?" I followed him. His office had previously belonged to Mavis, who retired earlier that year. Unlike Toby, Mavis never pretended to know everything. She asked questions, listened, made decisions. The room somehow felt smaller now. Toby closed the door. "So." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I need your help." "With what?" "Honestly." He laughed awkwardly. "I'm trying to understand how all these reporting systems connect." I waited. I assumed there'd be documentation. There is. But. He hesitated. "It's very technical. It explains exactly how everything works." "I know." He looked embarrassed. "I just don't understand it." For a second I actually felt sorry for him. This wasn't entirely his fault. He genuinely believed leadership meant confidence. Nobody had ever forced him to master the details. Now those details had become his responsibility. "I'll walk you through it." His shoulders relaxed. "I appreciate that." Over the next week I trained Toby every afternoon. I answered every question, explained every workflow, created additional guides, recorded video tutorials, even simplified several documents. I wasn't trying to sabotage him. Quite the opposite. If I left, I wanted nobody to honestly say I had made the transition difficult. Joshua noticed. "This is exactly why everyone respects you." I almost asked, "Then why wasn't that enough?" Instead I simply nodded. Thursday evening my phone rang. Unknown number. "Luca speaking." "Hello, this is Iona." I immediately sat straighter. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all. Elijah speaks very highly of you." I smiled. "That's kind of him. I'd rather make my own judgment." "Fair enough. I've read every improvement proposal you've published internally." I blinked. "You've seen those?" "They weren't confidential." "No, they weren't. Most had been attached to logistics conferences or industry working groups under my name. Small technical papers nobody inside Northbridge had ever discussed. Iona had apparently read them. Every single one. "You think in systems," she said. "That's difficult to teach." "I enjoy solving problems." "So I've noticed." She paused. "I'd like you to visit our headquarters next Friday." "For an interview?" "No." Another pause. "I already know your qualifications." I frowned. "Then why?" "I'd like to see whether we'd enjoy working together." For the first time in years. An interview wasn't about convincing someone I was capable. It was about whether we were the right fit for each other. When the call ended, I remained standing in my kitchen for several minutes. Not because I was excited, because I suddenly realized something. Joshua had spent months trying to convince me leadership wasn't about results. Yet complete strangers had noticed my work without ever meeting me. Maybe the problem had never been my ability. Maybe I'd simply stayed in the wrong place for too long. The interview at Horizon Supply Group didn't feel like an interview. There were no trick questions. No personality tests. No rehearsed speeches about where I saw myself in 5 years. Iona met me in the reception area herself. She shook my hand with a confident smile. "Luca, it's good to finally meet you." "You too." Instead of leading me to a conference room, she walked me through the operations floor. People greeted her by name. She greeted every one of them back. Not because she had memorized a leadership book, because she genuinely knew her employees. After 15 minutes she stopped beside a large digital planning board. "What do you notice?" I studied it carefully. "The warehouse team updates inventory every hour." She nodded. "The transport team every 3. Another nod. "The customer service dashboard refreshes manually." Exactly. I looked at her. "So everyone is working with different versions of reality." A smile spread across her face. "That's precisely our biggest problem." We spent nearly 2 hours discussing processes. Not salaries. Not job titles. Processes. Whenever I suggested an improvement, Iona challenged it. What happens if internet access fails? What if a supplier ignores the update? How would regional offices use this? Every question made the idea stronger. She wasn't trying to prove me wrong. She wanted to understand every weakness before implementation. By the end of the meeting, she closed her notebook. I think we'd work well together. I feel the same. I'm glad. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was an official offer. Senior Process Improvement Manager. A 25% salary increase. Flexible working hours. A dedicated development budget. Most importantly, authority to build the operational framework I'd been describing. No unrealistic promises. No executive title. No overnight success story. Just responsibility. Exactly what I'd wanted all along. I'd like a few days to think. Of course. She stood and smiled. I'd actually be worried if you accepted immediately. Back at Northbridge, things were changing faster than I expected. Toby looked exhausted. His office door stayed closed more often. The confident smile he'd worn after the promotion had almost disappeared. One afternoon he stopped beside my desk. You have a minute? We grabbed coffee downstairs. For several moments neither of us spoke. Finally he sighed. I owe you an apology. I looked at him. For what? I thought your job was easy. I almost laughed. So did I. No. He shook his head. I mean, I thought you were overcomplicating everything. He stared into his coffee. I had no idea how many moving parts there actually are. There wasn't much satisfaction in hearing that. Mostly because he sounded sincere. I should have asked more questions instead of assuming I understood. I nodded. Most people do. He looked genuinely embarrassed. I don't think Joshua realizes how much you actually handle. I didn't answer. There wasn't much point. 2 days later, Joshua asked me to join a client meeting. Halfway through the presentation, the client interrupted. Luca. I looked up. We've worked together for almost 3 years. That's right. I wanted to thank you. Joshua smiled, clearly expecting the compliment to continue. Instead, the client turned back to me. Every time there's a serious issue, you're the one who fixes it. The room became very quiet. You never make a big deal about it. You simply solve the problem. I thanked him politely. Joshua forced a smile. After the meeting ended, he stopped me in the hallway. I didn't realize you had such a strong relationship with them. I've worked on every one of their projects. He frowned. I suppose I never noticed. That sentence stayed with me for the rest of the day. He never noticed. Not because I was hiding, because he never looked. That evening I accepted Horizon's offer. Iona replied less than 5 minutes later. We're excited to have you on board. The next morning I printed my resignation letter. Walking toward Joshua's office felt strangely calm. A month earlier I had imagined this moment differently. I thought I'd feel angry, victorious, relieved. Instead, I simply felt finished. Joshua looked surprised when I placed the envelope on his desk. What's this? My resignation. His smile faded immediately. You're leaving. I've accepted another opportunity. He opened the letter. When? My notice period starts today. He leaned back in his chair. I wasn't expecting this. I know. Luca. He took a deep breath. Is this because of the promotion? I answered honestly. The promotion wasn't the reason. It wasn't. It was the moment I realized nothing was going to change. Silence filled the office. Finally he asked, Where are you going? Horizon Supply Group. His eyebrows lifted. Iona recruited you? Yes. I've met her. He stared at the resignation letter. They've been expanding aggressively. They have. Another long silence. I wish we'd talked before this. I looked at him. We've been talking for 3 years. He didn't have an answer. My notice period passed more smoothly than I expected. I documented every process, updated every manual, held training sessions for anyone who wanted them. Even Toby attended every one. On my final Friday, the department gathered for a small farewell lunch. Nothing extravagant. Pizza, cake, A few speeches. Theo thanked me for my professionalism. Sasha admitted she had learned more from watching me work than from any formal training. Even Toby stood up. I know I probably didn't say this enough, he began, but a lot of what this department achieves exists because of Luca. The room became silent. Joshua looked down at his plate. I hope I can keep improving what you've built. I smiled. I hope you do. 'Cause I meant it. Companies don't fail because one employee leaves. They struggle when they stop recognizing the people quietly holding everything together. As I packed the last box from my desk that afternoon, I looked around the office one final time. 3 years earlier, I'd walked into this room believing hard work always spoke for itself. Now I understood something different. Hard work matters, but staying where nobody listens can make even your best work invisible. I picked up the box, switched off my monitor, and walked toward the elevator. This time I wasn't walking away from failure. I was finally walking toward a place where my work would have room to grow. My first Monday at Horizon Supply Group started without a single speech. No welcome presentation. No company-wide email announcing my arrival. Iona simply handed me an access badge and said, "Spend this week observing." Nothing else. She smiled. If you try to change everything on day one, people will spend more time resisting you than listening to you. It was probably the best management advice I'd ever received, so I listened. I visited warehouses, sat with customer service, joined planning meetings, watched dispatch coordinators solve problems in real time. Instead of asking, "Why do you do it this way?" asked, "What slows you down the most?" The answers were surprisingly consistent. Too many emails, too many spreadsheets, too many people updating the same information in different places. The problems weren't caused by lazy employees. They were caused by disconnected systems. Exactly what I had expected. By the end of the second week, I presented a pilot project. Nothing revolutionary. Just one regional office, one warehouse, one planning team. If we can save them 2 hours a day, I explained, the numbers will speak for themselves. Nobody argued. Nobody demanded unrealistic guarantees. Iona looked around the meeting room. Any concerns? People raised practical questions. We discussed every one of them. When the meeting ended, she turned to me. Good work. 2 simple words. Yet they meant more than every motivational speech I'd heard at Northbridge. The pilot launched 3 weeks later. The first few days were messy. One report failed to update. A supplier entered incorrect information. Several employees forgot to use the new workflow. Instead of blaming anyone, we adjusted the process. By the end of the first month, the results became impossible to ignore. Planning meetings were 30% shorter. Customer response times improved. Late shipments dropped steadily. More importantly, employees stopped staying late just to finish paperwork. One afternoon, I walked through the operations floor and noticed something unusual. People were leaving on time. Not because there was less work, because unnecessary work had disappeared. That was always my goal. Not making people work harder, helping them work smarter. 3 months after I joined Horizon, Iona invited me into her office. She placed a printed report on the table. I think you'll enjoy reading this. The report compared operational performance before and after the pilot. Every major indicator had improved. Not dramatically, realistically. Exactly the kind of steady progress that lasts. We're expanding the system nationwide, she said. I smiled. That's great news. And she leaned back. The board approved funding for your development team. My team. You can't build everything alone. She was right. At Northbridge I had tried. Here I wouldn't have to. Around the same time, I received a message from Sasha. We hadn't spoken since my farewell lunch. Do you have a minute? I called her that evening. You sound happy, she laughed. I am. I can hear it. After talking for a few minutes, she became serious. Things have been difficult. At Northbridge. Yes. I didn't interrupt. Joshua keeps asking why projects are taking longer. And everyone finally realizes how much coordination you were doing behind the scenes. She sighed. None of us really understood. I wasn't trying to hide it. I know. There was a brief silence. Toby's trying. I believe that. He really is. I'm glad. She sounded surprised by my answer. You don't seem angry. I was. For a while. But carrying that around doesn't improve my life. A few weeks later, an email appeared in my inbox. From Joshua. I stared at the sender's name for several seconds before opening it. Luca, I've been meaning to write for some time. After you left, I spent several weeks reviewing how our department operated. The truth is uncomfortable. I confused visibility with value. I rewarded confidence without taking enough time to understand where our results actually came from. That's my responsibility, and I regret it. I also owe you an apology for not listening more carefully over the years. I hope your new role is everything you wanted it to be. I genuinely wish you success. Joshua. I read the message twice. Months earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they simply felt honest. I replied with one short email. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your honesty, and I wish you and the team the best moving forward. Take care. Luca. Then I closed my inbox. Not because I was dismissing him. Because there was nothing left to prove. 6 months after joining Horizon, we held our quarterly company meeting. This time I stood at the front of the room. Not because I had the loudest voice. Not because I was the most charismatic person there. Because the work spoke for itself. When the presentation ended, people didn't applaud the software. They applauded the teams who had improved it together. That mattered to me. As everyone left the room, Iona stopped beside me. You know, she said. When Elijah first recommended you, he told me you were one of the smartest process designers he'd ever worked with. I laughed. I hope I lived up to the recommendation. She smiled. You exceeded it. I looked across the operations floor. People were collaborating. Managers were asking questions instead of pretending to know every answer. Ideas were discussed on their merit, not on who suggested them. It wasn't a perfect company. No company ever is. But it was a place where effort wasn't invisible. Where curiosity mattered. Where solving problems mattered. As I packed my laptop that evening, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a message from Toby. Just wanted to let you know we finally finished updating the reporting process. Your documentation saved us weeks of work. Thanks for leaving everything in good shape. I smiled before typing my reply. Glad it helped. Wishing you all the best. I put my phone away and walked toward the parking lot. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the building. For years I believed success meant finally convincing the wrong people to recognize my value. I had been wrong. Real success wasn't changing someone else's opinion. It was finding an environment where good work didn't need constant justification. Sometimes the biggest career move isn't chasing a better title. It's choosing people who respect what you bring to the table before you have to fight to prove it. Looking back, I no longer saw the missed promotion as the worst day of my career. It had been the turning point. The moment I stopped waiting for recognition and started building a future where my work could genuinely make a difference. And in the end, that was worth far more than the promotion I never received.